Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of CLTV at Educator Innovator. It's January 10th, 2018, and I'm your host, Christina Cantrell from the National Writing Project. I'm logging in here from Philadelphia. Tonight, I'm really excited to chat with these three colleagues. Just like 6 months ago, we were in Denver together. It feels like yesterday, but all of these colleagues have been LRNG Innovator grantees over the last few years and have been working to design and develop connected learning with youth in their classrooms, their schools, and their writing project communities over the last few years. So we were together this summer at a writing retreat to sort of share and document this work. And they were each writing up about the work they were doing, which was really exciting. But then I also was overhearing them talking amongst themselves about the ways that their work was very similar and the sort of some of the unifying themes that they saw across their work. And they put together a really nice blog post about the implications of their students having authentic and meaningful audiences for work in their classrooms. So we wanted to get together tonight. Took us a little while, but we're really excited to be able to talk about this work and to reconnect with each other. And I want to just give them a chance to introduce themselves, just a little bit about where you are and what's the kind of work you're working on in your context. Sorry, Kate.
Hi, my name is Kate Fox. I'm from the Burch School, which is in Rock Tavern, New York. We're about 75 miles north of Manhattan. We are a small, independent, nonprofit, mixed-age learning community of about 30 students. We have been in operation for 5 years, so we're relatively new, and we are founded on connected learning principles and have been exploring a lot of different ways to put them into practice in real life with real kids. It's been a fun project. I look forward to talking to them about it.
Great, thanks. Laura?
Hi, I'm Laura Bradley. I teach 8th grade English, 8th grade Design Lab, and 7th and 8th grade Broadcast Media at Kenilworth Junior High in Petaluma, California.
And Jennifer.
Hi, I'm Jennifer von Wahlde. I teach at Darien High School in Darien, Connecticut, and I've been working with my 10th and 12th graders to try to get them to think more about how their writing is part of a broader context of, thinking about literature and the place it plays in our lives.
Great, wonderful. Well, thank you all for being here and making the time to share this work with us. Let me go, there's a blog post that you all wrote that can be found at The Current at Educator Innovator. So that's thecurrent.educator.org. And it's written, posted by Laura, but co-written by all of you. At the beginning, though, I love this quote. Laura quotes one of her students, so I just wanted to read it for a second, and then maybe you guys could tell us a little bit about this conversation you were having. So Laura writes, "The most powerful feedback I got from my 8th graders when I introduced them to blogging was, well, no offense, Miss Bradley, but when I knew my writing was going to be posted on a blog where all my friends would see it. I worked a lot harder on it than when you were going to read it." And she writes, "And that opened my eyes to the power of meaningful, authentic audience." So with our students' voices in mind, Laura, maybe you can share with us sort of what this meant to you and what this opened up in your classroom and context.
So that was in my English classroom, and that was the very beginning of having technology and the ability for my kids to write and post online. And all these 20 plus years of teaching, when I thought that my grade was the most meaningful part of their work, and therefore they would do their best work for me, it completely blew up when they were able to post on their own blog and their friends were commenting. And so that really was the beginning of radical changes in my English class as they put more and more of their work onto digital portfolios and blogs and began to discover what happens when their work is seen by more than just their teacher. My LRNG grant is for our broadcast media class, which that news production that the kids do is aired every single day. Every day they make a new show, and then it's shown in the morning classes the following day. And the pressure is pretty high because they make the show in my classroom, but they're sitting in another classroom the next day when they watch it. And they're surrounded by their peers who are not necessarily in the broadcast class. And so having that audience, being a part of the audience and having it right there with them, really motivates them to do the best work they can because of who will be watching it with them. You're muted.
Sorry. I was going to say, you actually are in that media production lab as we talk, right?
Yes, that's our studio behind me, and the kids do all of the work beforehand, writing the script, making the graphics. They operate the technology, very, very difficult technology that you see in a professional studio, and the kids run the show entirely themselves every day.
Awesome. Great. Thank you. Who wants to follow up? Go ahead, Jennifer.
I'd love to piggyback that one because I had the same kind of eye-opening experience with my students too, where they just weren't invested in the work that they were doing for me. And I was aware of that, but I was struggling with how to get them more invested. And when we first started with Google Apps for Education and we had access to, much more technology, and we were really pushing a technology agenda at the school, I was like, okay, so how can I use that to help them? And it was at the same time that we were having a bunch of, there were some incidents happening with students in social media, and it was part of our larger conversation at the school. And I thought, okay, they can use social media to communicate with each other, and they really seem to care a lot about that, and they're really invested in the responses that they get from each other, i.e. the comments on the blogs even. And so my goal was to think of ways where their words were public for my classroom as well, and hoping, and correctly so, that they would be a little bit more concerned about what they were saying and doing in a public sphere. So that was our first step. And then with our grant, we put together a symposium where we had 6 schools from 6 different districts, very disparate, come together and present that work. And it really gave this validation to what we were doing in an English classroom that seemed perhaps, maybe like another box to check, only when you bring it together and you share with other students and you see what they're doing. And there's that compare and contrast aspect of it where they thought, well, what we did was actually really cool. And they just had a pride in their work at that point that I had been unable to kind of motivate them to have before that point.
Kate, do you want to?
Sure. In our situation, being a new school sort of centered around connected learning principles, initially we knew that we wanted to have a celebration of learning in the format of a showcase, which we hold in the evening, and families are invited to come and bring grandparents and siblings. Well, the first few showcases that we did, we noticed that the days leading up to the showcase were some of the most focused and industrious times that our kids were, that we were seeing. And they were doing so really enthusiastically and unself-consciously and really wanting to do good work. So when we talked with them about it, there were a few things, and I think I mentioned some of them in the blog post. One of the things that they said was, not only my parents are going to be here, but other people's parents are going to be here. And the other thing that they also told us was, like, the showcase is on Thursday night, and if your stuff isn't in it, if you miss it, you've missed it. You've missed your chance. So those were both some really powerful, authentic motivations that we were seeing in our students. And since we are a private independent school, when we observed that, we said, how can we maximize this? And so what we've done is we're on a trimester system now, and the last 2 weeks of each trimester is dedicated only to showcase preparation and also student-led conferences. but a good percentage of time for open-ended projects that the kids can collaborate together. They can do independent projects. They can really get in the flow. They could, work on one project for the whole entire day, set out all their supplies and everything. So, so the showcase, the motivation that the showcase has provided has become a really integral part of how our whole program is built.
Great, thank you. And as you guys were talking, I was just writing down some words that struck me as you're talking, because there was blowing up, pressure, eye-opening, validation, pride, unselfconsciously, other people's parents. I feel like there's like a lot of energy in those words, and it sort of struck me as you're talking about sort of this shift, how energetic things seem to get actually through even just those small stories. And I'm thinking, I know we have some student work that we want to share too, and I feel like it would be great to look at what some of the kids were creating in these contexts. So what should we start with first? Should we start with the video first, just to get, to make sure that works and everything? Okay, let's get that up here. So this is, can you all see it? Do you want to give it a thumbs up if you can see it? Okay, great. So hopefully we'll be able to hear it too. But this is work from Laura's classroom. Laura, do you want to give the context for it? And then we'll...
Yeah, so the students produce the news show, which is basically the announcements that the teachers and the admin need the students to hear, but to give them some more input into the show and some more experience with broadcast work. They also work on movies. They film intros and outros for the shows, and we put up a list of the kinds of videos that we need made. And so a group of students, this is a box that we have in the office, and we wanted the students to make a movie to encourage other students to use the appreciation box. And really it's an example of how when the kids are doing it, they're doing it in a way that the other kids will like. If the teachers were to make the videos, we don't know what the kids would want to see. And so the kids did the whole planning of it and the filming of it, and bringing in the staff members as well. That was all their idea.
Oh, that's great. Okay. So I haven't seen this, and Kate and Jennifer haven't seen this, I don't think. So we were thinking we would play it and sort of have the three of us just sort of talk about things that we notice in it, and any questions we might have for Laura. And then Laura, we'd love you to sort of talk about the things that you're excited about in this piece as we play it. Okay. So give me a thumbs up when I hit play to let me know that you can hear it too. Awesome.
They have to be short. We tell them they have to be between 30 and 60 seconds because the whole news show is not supposed to be more than 5 minutes. And so that's hard. Learning how to, it's sort of like Twitter, you have a limited amount of space to get your message across. So they do a lot with iMovie learning film editing.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I was going to say what I noticed was there was a story that I could understand in a really short period of time. And that tissue was just like the perfect move.
That was all him. So do you want to hear more from me about the production of that?
Yeah, and Kate and Jennifer, is there anything that you noticed or want to say about it? And then we'll...
I don't know, yeah. Well, I just think what's neat about seeing students record themselves and try to get that narrative arc together is sort of seeing, I don't know, there's like this level of excitement that you can see, you know, in the ones who get picked to act. You know, there's a sheepishness at first at who's on camera, but to see them really get into it and deliver the goods, I guess, is really neat.
It's also cool to see students working together with teachers like that on a project together. You know, they're soliciting the assistance of the adults to kind of play the part, and it really gives it a lot of validation, and it's a real thing. You know, they don't want to waste adults' time, so, or you hope not. But anyway, I like that that's a good piece of it too.
And a part of the process is they have to submit a draft of the movie to me, and the whole thing ended up being redone a couple of times because of issues like they didn't understand the quick cutting of the film, and so they filmed themselves walking all the way across campus and opening up the teacher's classroom door and delivering, you know, so things like that. It reminds me of the writing process where they are really excited about it, and I say, no, not quite ready yet. You need to go back and do some revision and submit it again. And so a really valuable process there. They're in control of it, but they still have to submit to an editor and continue to do some work with it.
A question I have is what was the editing time, or like from when they started to when they published it? Or
they work in 3-week job rotations in the studio, and so they usually have about 3 weeks to work on whatever project that they're doing, and I think that's about how much time that one took. They had to learn things like watching a student write a name on a paper is really slow and boring, and so, oh look, we can speed it up in iMovie so it doesn't take so long. Initially they had my name on the paper, and I said, no, we can't have our class putting out a video with my name. And it's funny to watch them because they're initially a little bit crushed because they think they're done. And so they do the same thing in class. It used to be that we had to film it all in one take and the class was over, and we've gotten to the point now where they want to start filming earlier because they want the ability to say, cut, start again, somebody messed up. And so they're really learning about the revision process, and they have that buy-in to make it good enough before it's going to go on YouTube.
That's great. It does remind me that writing process and that the development of that ability to go back in and do it again. You know, it's a little, you have to sort of develop that. I mean, even I still feel like I'm developing that. Okay, I'll work on it still again.
Yeah, that's one of the like sort of unintended consequences of our showcase format, because for students who have gone through the showcase now, you know, 3 or 6 times, they recognize that if they leave everything to the last minute, that the quality of their work suffers. And so I've seen students now, you can really tell the students who have a lot of experience with it are questioning. So, you know, is this a good showcase project? Can I start working on this, you know, somewhere in the middle of the trimester, not waiting to the last minute? And that's a really nice unintended consequence that we've seen.
Yeah, and I think just to focus in on this idea of the transition and of, you know, the connection between different parts of things, I think that's something that we saw too in trying to publish our work in different formats on the blog, because if you have a dead link, it's very clear. You know, if you've got a format set up and someone's in the middle of, you know, clicking through and reading something and then suddenly nothing works, that's a very clear indication that you need to go back in and fix it again. That I don't think they always see when, you know, writing an essay. If you hit a dead end or there's a tangent or something doesn't make sense, it's a lot easier to sort of gloss over that.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So should we segue to sharing one of the blog posts that your kids did?
Sure.
Okay, let me see. Here we go. So you're going to have to walk us through, I think, a little bit just so we can make sure we can see it. Yep.
Yeah. So this whole site was something that students created together. So, you know, the process, even in terms of thinking about 4 modes of writing, Pennies for Our Thoughts was the personal writing that we did in class. Get Creative was the, sort of fan fiction, emulation, and creative spin-offs of things. Current on the 8 is our more editorial nonfiction writing, and The Color of the Door means something, I swear. Goes to show the sort of the tone of my class, of that class, where they were like, okay, we're going to overanalyze everything here, because that's what we do when we write literary analysis essays, Ms. von Wahlde, So that was our more analytical work. And so we had these 4 different modes, and students had a lot of choice in terms of, we'd read a text, and then what are you feeling as far as your response? Do you want to write a personal piece? Do you want to write something, more research-based or analytical or whatever? And so their only requirement was that they had to post something in all 4 modes at some point during the year publicly. And so the missing chapter assignment is one that not every single student had to publish one of their creative pieces, the missing chapters, which was an emulation of Catcher in the Rye. And so for this project, what we had done was, after reading the book, we started to think about all the different places where Holden changed lanes, or said, I don't want to talk about it anymore, or kind of just left us hanging and really didn't finish a storyline. And that was where they began to think about where they would write their own little missing chapter, a section that explained the thing that was unanswered. So we kind of then, after they had done that and everybody did that, we decided whose missing chapters would get published, and who would like to do that. And then everybody collaborated in the classroom. Everybody had different jobs in terms of being, sort of editors for the different sections, and sort of, so what they did was a kind of a version of summary of the story, where they then inserted at the, appropriate places. These links are where the missing chapters begin to fill in that story in that section. So it became a bit of a interactive text once it was published.
It's really cool. I love how you embedded it within the chapters. Like, one could read these along with the original text, right? So you're sort of...
That was the idea, right? So that's kind of where we wanted to, we're almost like we're retelling the story, and what the focus is here is on, our stories that fill in those blanks. But sure, you could absolutely then jump to, say, chapter 5, where he says he's going to call somebody up, but then he doesn't, and we can go into the story of why he doesn't, or what he did instead, and kind of dig a little deeper.
Yeah, that's great. Any, and Kate, and the same thing, we're all looking at this for the first time. Kate and Laura, anything that you want to say, or something you notice about this, or ask about it?
I would love to be a fly on the wall as they talked about the writing style and how they would emulate his writing, and how you structured that. Was that something that they worked on figuring out on their own, or were there some really targeted lessons on that? That would be really interesting to see that happening.
Yeah. So alongside our reading of the text, we look at different things in terms of his style of sentence, his sort of favorite vocabulary, the different phrases that he likes to use and when he uses them. And so we had already started to pick those things out. And then to think too about his attitude throughout the book, and how it shifts, and how the language shifts along with that, and maybe the vocabulary, the length of sentences, they get longer when he's, feeling more depressed, say, or, and so that was part of our conversation and focus the whole way through. What was interesting, though, was that through some combination of looking at his use of, kind of phrases and simple either fragments or really short sentences to punctuate different ideas and thoughts, they sort of just, I feel like, internalized his language a lot. And so a lot of them, when they sat down to write like Holden, didn't have to think about it too much, but again, here too, this is where the revision process was really key, because some of them went a little too far, and they were using language that in their interpretation sounded like Holden, but was not appropriate to the time period and things like that. So we had to scale it back and talk about, well, how would he really, what kind of a name would he really call somebody, or how would he really characterize this? Go back to that part in the text. So it was a really neat way of getting them to reread, rethink, reanalyze very specific sections of text, and then compare it to, their own, and to start to really see the nuances of his diction and his syntax.
I like how you have the various different categories for their writing, because I noticed when we started to have kids post their things on the blog, some kind of writing they're very reluctant to share. And so this way, you've kind of outlined a lot of different styles of writing. So if they get comfortable in a writing that's a little less revealing, then perhaps they're more comfortable posting something that might be more revealing. Most recently, we used our blog post for writing that was inspired by art. So some of it came out in very poetic, and some of it was very revealing. And so they had a hard time posting that. Did you find that was an issue for some of your kids?
Definitely. And even if we looked at, even on, if it's probably earlier on this page, we had done some poetry stuff too. If you just scroll up to the top here, it's still under the Get Creative label.
Yeah.
And so this was harder to get students to volunteer their pieces for, but again, because everybody had a role, I think it sort of took some of the pressure off, because these blurbs would, for example, would be something that the editors would write about the poet's work as it was being put online. Other students were able to take, they had the option of taking, with permission, one of the students' poems and then reimagining it in some of these video formats. So the poet himself, herself didn't have to be the one, perhaps, being in front of the camera, or, it could kind of just reimagine, reinvent. But because this was maybe the third quarter of our year, and we'd already been publishing different types of things, and they already had a chance to choose what kind of writing they wanted to publish in the first two, editorial runs that we had. I think they did feel a little bit more like, okay, I got to get something up there, and I'm actually pretty proud of this, so I'm just going to give it a go. And I think, at the beginning of the year, they definitely would have been like, oh, I don't want to put my poetry online, too scary.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's one of the hardest challenges, is getting them to feel comfortable. But once, like you said, once they get there, then that hurdle's kind of been met, and it's not so much of a deterrent moving forward, but it's a process that they have to go through for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
Great. Why don't we thank you, Jennifer and Laura, and why don't we'll look at some of Kate's work. I wanted to mention at the top of the show, I mentioned that you each wrote a blog about the work in their classrooms, where these pieces of work emerged from, and they're all really interesting. I know, Jennifer, you go into sort of the tensions of this sort of the ways that you thought your students might want to be online, and then the ways you found that they really were online, and then, so sort of unpacking what it meant to be online together in this way. You unpack that a lot in your blog post, and I think that's a whole other fascinating story, actually, about that journey that you did together to actually get this blog up and running. So yeah. Let's see. Now I just have to find the work that I pulled up with Kate's students. Okay. Kate, you ready?
Yeah, so I mentioned earlier that we do a student showcase. We do this 3 times per year. And one of the pieces that I wanted to share with you all was, this is a science project. This is a high schooler, a 9th grader, who we've been studying biology and the human body. And so her poster was about the digestion the digestive system. And this student also happens to be in a handwork class where they've been doing a lot of sewing with felt and creating things in 3 dimensions. So I was really appreciated this piece because I see what she's done is she's made her poster 3-dimensional and interactive, because underneath each of those little flaps is sort of like interesting facts and details about the digestive system. So I think this is sort of an interesting example of how students are sort of motivated to take it to the next level when they know that there is an audience beyond their teacher. It's interesting that we have been instituting a feedback system with the posters and with the various products that the kids have been generating for the showcase. So the showcase is typically in the evening, and the next morning kids are exhausted. A lot of them have spent a lot of time and a lot of stress getting ready for the showcase, and there's a huge sense of relief. But we spend some time that morning, we give each of the students usually about 5 sticky notes, and we ask them to go around and put the sticky notes on some of the work that really impressed them or that they found a connection with or that they really liked. And then what we do is we go and we take a few of those pieces that have numerous sticky notes on them and bring them to the group for a feedback and evaluation. So in this way, we're able to hold up some really quality, authentic work for students to look at and look at what makes that special, what really made that stand out. And this was one of the posters that was chosen for that review for obvious reasons. What's really interesting about that process is those posters are chosen sort of by the community to evaluate. We don't focus a lot on the producer of that particular piece of work, but more so on the work itself. And then we invite students to, if they want to, go get a piece of their work off the wall and bring it to the circle for a review. And the last time we did that, we had about 12 students who, of their own choice, went and took their work and brought that to the community for some evaluation, which really showed me that they are beginning to value that feedback from others. They're understanding that it's not a personal, they're not reflecting on them personally, but that we together are trying to raise the quality of work that our community is producing, and that they felt safe enough to choose to come with some of their work, genuinely interested in what the feedback was, hopefully, you know, to make improvements for the future. So we thought that was a really interesting voluntary process that we were using, that's setting an example and hoping that more students choose to participate in that next time we do a showcase.
That's thanks. And this photo too, you wanted to share? You see?
The next one?
Yeah, maybe I actually have to screen share this one separately. This was
So this is actually at the showcase. These are some grandparents. This was a group mural. So a showcase is also an opportunity for kids to exhibit some work that they've done together. So this is a 5th grade class who's working on the ecosystem. We live by the Hudson River, so it's the Hudson River ecosystem. But as you can see, you know, parents are coming and looking at the work, and, you know, the kids are not in this picture, but they are in the vicinity seeing people actually admire and look at the work that they've done. And I have to say that the feeling after showcase it's such an uplifting celebration of learning that the kids are so enthusiastic about that event. The parents are really happy to see their kids publicly exhibiting their work and are often impressed at what they are learning about what their kids are doing. That momentum that we generate in that showcase really carries us through a lot of the year. And, you know, sort of meets our goal of bringing joy to learning. So it's really become a key component of what we're delivering.
That's great. Thank you. Jennifer, Laura, anything you want to, oops, I was going to share the other one again, sorry. Go ahead.
It made me think of what open house should be like, you know, the traditional open house when the parents are invited to come and you know, the teachers will throw together something and the kids will pull out something to have something on display. And looking at the one about the digestive system, I just think of how much time had to go into that. and how different that is from how we tend to approach open house, that it really is a great way to put meaning to a significant project, as opposed to, just throw together something so that the parents have something to see.
I love the idea of the showcase too, for the same, reasons. I think of the things that you saw in terms of validating student work and really making it meaningful beyond the classroom. And when you were describing the peer feedback process, that's something that I've found really helpful with our work, in the classroom as well. The Post-it notes, the sticky notes with the comments and the questions, and that really opens a dialogue very nicely for getting the creators to think about their work, but also to get some praise for their work and the effort and investment that they have. But I just love that loop, and it really helps students engage in that reflective, thinking that sometimes feels maybe forced in other assignments and venues, when we've done sort of like a, let's process what we did, in this paper and what part of the feedback was most helpful kind of deal. And this feels much more like an authentic sort of feedback loop where, everybody's kind of working together to consider what's been made and the importance of it.
I'm also struck, I am struck by that feedback loop, and I'd love to talk about that in a moment too. But I'm also struck by what you said at the beginning, that, she was working on, in a textile class or something like that, the ways that this is bringing something that she's working on, potentially a passion project or something that she's interested in, and she brings it into this like much more sort of academic medical subject, and the sort of the love that expresses, like there's this like very, it's very affectionate. They all have faces. So, it's just kind of adorable, but it does show that sort of playfulness, and that like, or what I feel from it is this sense of playfulness and this sense of real care, and, bringing sort of multiple aspects of herself into the mix here.
Yeah, and that really describes this particular student. She is an exemplary student in a lot of different ways. But I think one of the things that was really helpful for us as a community when the kids were looking at that piece was they said, wow, that must have taken a lot of time. And she was able to say, well, yes, it did. And the students said, you must have worked on that outside of school. And she said, actually, yes, I did. And so they began to understand that that kind of quality and care doesn't just come from like something that you do quickly in class, that care, it extended into her time outside of school. And so I think that was a real eye-opener for some of the other students to realize that, maybe I need to pay a little more attention if I want to have quality work like that. So
I was going to comment on how clear her voice is in that piece. I think, like Christina was saying, her personality kind of comes across in the way that she's created, this textile. And it makes me think too of just how we can talk about teaching students how to write with their own voices all we want, but maybe our assignments aren't as authentic as they can be in terms of inspiring that voice, and she, I don't know, I almost feel like I wouldn't be surprised to meet her, if I ran into her.
Well, so just to take a second for us, we didn't really plan all that well ahead of time what we were going to share. And yet we just shared 3 amazingly different things that are incredibly rich examples of work. And that all have that sort of voice in them in really different ways. So I think that's really interesting. So thank you all, and thank your students for sharing that work with us. That's really beautiful. I wanted to sort of encourage us now to sort of think about the implications of all of this for our continued work in our classrooms, and maybe things that we might want to share with colleagues who are thinking about this work or sort of even taking some first steps. You know, with some colleagues, we've been talking a lot about some of the small moves we can make, and how finding an audience in some ways helps with some of those small moves. So wondering if you have any thoughts or ideas there.
As far as small moves go, because what I did is messy and it's time consuming, and you know, in the following years has been kind of a struggle as other things take over to you know, how do I make this happen again? But little things that I've continued to do, one was to maintain sort of, you know, my blog where old blogs are being, you know, linked there, but I use that to invite students to engage, you know, via comments, via responses in different small ways, so that it's not as big of an investment always. It doesn't have to be, but they still, when given the chance to respond to a question I've posed in a public forum or ask them to consider, you know, an idea, that the amazing thing is the quality of writing I can get from them and the thinking in what they think is a very informal, low stakes kind of assignment, is a really helpful, you know, bit of that sort of process in terms of being able to point to something and go, well, you know, when you are invested in this is how you said this, right? So how do we take that way of thinking about something into this piece of writing that you're going to do, or, you know, thinking. So it provides a really nice way to start talking about them as writers, without torturing them with an essay.
A step that we're slowly starting to make at our school, most of the English teachers have had their students make digital portfolios. And so we've been saying to the other departments, the English teachers can have the kids make a portfolio, and then each other department can have kids add a page. And that way the kids aren't making multiple portfolios, they're making one that would represent all of their work at the junior high. And so that's what we're hoping will be a small step to help the other teachers see how their kids can publish their work, take their best assignments. They can take pictures of it if they want, if it's not a digital version, and upload it onto this portfolio, and provide ways that then the students can share with their class members and with their parents through a digital portfolio.
That's great. Kate, do you want to?
I think also that the engagement with the authentic audience is gradual. I think the more they do it, then the more comfortable they become with it, and the more useful that process becomes. I've noticed that that's really happened in our situation because we're fortunate enough to have that sort of regular public showcase. But I think that as they really recognize that it's okay, that it's safe, and that they actually can get some good feedback and some self-esteem, some positive feedback, that kind of momentum is really, like I mentioned before, keeping us going. But I think that the more they do it, the more effective it is. So I don't know how that translates into baby steps, but you have to start somewhere, I guess.
Right. Well, I do think it goes back to what Jennifer was saying about that loop that starts to happen. And I was also thinking about the blog post you wrote about your work, and how there is this showcase, and how, as Laura says, how important that sort of showcase moment is. But the kids are also working in small groups back in school, and so that starts to feed itself, right? And then you build momentum that way. So either starting with one or the other probably, starts to create a loop. Or that's the way I'm hearing it when you describe it.
Yeah, I was just going to say too, I think when we begin, maybe perhaps even just by making the work more public in the classroom, and inviting students to, do like a gallery walk if it's something visual that can be posted around. And I've done this, and have them, write either sort of a analytical summary of what they're seeing, right? And then to be able to feed, to tell that back to the artist or to the creator. That begins that conversation, that dialogue about, what we're doing right now, what I see, what I notice, and how that then becomes something that I'm thinking about for my own practice, my own work.
And I'm struck too by, Jennifer, you were saying you have your own blog, and I know you keep your own blog, Laura, too. Is there something about that, sort of your personal practice being public? Is there anything to share about that?
It's the key to modeling, right? So if I'd like you to write publicly, here's how I write publicly, and here are the things that, I find worth writing about. And, so I've been able to talk a little, being able to talk about my process as a writer, and the different things that have to happen for the formats I'm choosing, just are much more authentic conversations when I can say, hey, I had a 4,500 word piece that I submitted to a 1,500 word, minimum. I had to get it down, and this is how that looked, and this is what I did. Okay, now I'd like you to try that. How do you figure out what the most important part of this is? I'm being vulnerable in a way that I'm asking them to be vulnerable, and so it feels to them, a little bit more like a shared experience.
I'm just thinking about what happens when I first started blogging. I would write about things that we had done in my class, kind of like, oh, look how cool this is. And recently I've started doing more blogging of things that I'm planning to do, and I'm discovering how that forces me to kind of put myself out there and say, I'll be back again in a couple weeks to let you know how it went. And so that really changes the way that I'm thinking about what I'm doing in my classroom, and the commitment that I'm making to follow through, and to the fact that hopefully there is an audience saying, oh, I can't wait to see it. My mother at least says, I can't wait to see how it works.
That's awesome.
And yes, part of teaching my kids blogging is talking about why in the world do people blog? What is it, and why do people do it? And I like to be able to share my own and say, this is why I do it, and this is why my friend who is a gardener has a blog. It's a different purpose, but it allows us to connect and share with people beyond our classrooms. Before all of this connected teaching, I've been in California my whole life. I have never seen or experienced winter the way you all do. And so, my life has changed being able to see all of that online. And so I want my kids to be able to do that as well. And the classroom that I'm in right now is it's also a design lab. And I just got a new group of students for the new semester. And I asked them to tell me how they use technology at home. They are almost all only using it for social media. And it's very interesting to me that what they're going to learn in my class is all kinds of things that they can create, design, 3D print, publish, and for the most part, these so-called digital natives are really just using it for social media. So there's all sorts of potential in the connected learning that they may not be getting.
And it strikes me the power of those portfolios that they're working on too. That way. Let me share that. Kate, I know you also, there are collective blogs that you've done with your students at Burch, right?
This fall we did a special project with Storm King Art Center, which is a world-class, huge sculpture museum nearby, very close to where school is. And so one of our teachers went to a national writing project, Hudson Valley Writing Project, professional development, where they made some connections about using this as a tool. And out of that, she created a student blog where she asked students to post their writings in response to some of the pieces that we saw. a lot of the kids waited until the very, very last minute to post anything because they wanted to make sure that it was, you know, exactly right. But that we noticed again, as that we did that over 9 weeks, and in the first couple of weeks there was a lot of hesitation to engage with that, but by the 8th or 9th week there was a lot of anticipation about what other people were going to be posting and what they could be reading and sharing. So you know, we used that for one particular project, not and we were sort of not using it now, but I noticed that kids are going back to it, and one of our students who's particularly musical has gone back to some of his writings there and tried to put that to music. So it obviously made an impact on their experience, and they're still thinking about it. So I'm thinking that being able to see other students' work brought that experience to a whole different level than if they had just experienced that themselves and written, because they all saw those same pieces of art, and we all have different experiences of art. So this allowed them to sort of have a rounded, you know, experience that, and understand what other people were really getting, you know, inspired in different ways from that same piece of art. So that was a really successful project that we can do again with our middle schools.
Great, thank you. Well, I think we're getting to the end of our show. I wanted to say that all the links that we've talked about today will be shared with this broadcast. And then you can also look up on the current, the collective piece that this group wrote that Laura published called The Power of Authenticity, Motivating Students with Meaningful Audiences. And that links to all of their individual blog posts about the work that they've all been doing. So I encourage everybody listening and watching to go read that and follow some of those links. Maybe if anybody has some final thoughts, and then we'll wrap for the night. One of my final thoughts is just that I feel so lucky to have had a chance to see some of that work tonight. I just get so excited when I see what youth are creating in these contexts and how rich that work is, and then hear all of what you're bringing and designing to support them in doing that. That's really great for me to hear and listen to and see the work. It's really exciting. So thank you. Any final thoughts from anyone else? Laura? Go ahead.
Yeah, we've been posting our show on YouTube for about 5 years now. And so that allows us to share it, you know, with anybody. We send the links to parents, say, you know, so-and-so did a great job today. But something really cool happened recently where a student's parent happens to be good friends with Cheryl Jennings, who is a news anchor in San Francisco. She's been doing that for over 30 years. And she's going to FaceTime with our class and give us a tour of studio, and we're going to give her a tour of our studio. So I tweeted her an episode to thank her, and she retweeted it and tagged her sports anchor and said, check it out, there's an up-and-coming sports anchor. You know, wow. Like, what? This is crazy. So the potential is it's just really exciting what the kids can do and see and share with other people.
It's lovely.
I think my final thought is, one of my final thoughts is just, again, that potential, that idea that connected learning and authentic sort of, you know, finding authentic audiences for our students means that we as teachers are trying to find authentic spaces to engage in beyond our classrooms. And I think the potential there is so much greater because we're seeing what we're doing. And I think by sharing what we do in our own classrooms, we demystify it, and we can continue to spread the good word everywhere that, you know, rote learning and sort of this seated, you know, idea of, you know, traditional learning and education is not really what's happening in most of our classrooms. And I think, you know, I work with a lot of new teachers who are kind of afraid to move too far beyond that because that seems to still be what everybody wants. I think if we listen to our students and we engage them, you know, in some of these very meaningful experiences and share that work, you know, with the public, it starts to really spread a message of what engaged, connected learning really is.
Yeah, I also think that it allows us to kind of, you know, one of my main goals is to bring joy to learning. And I think that having that authentic audience and that internal motivation really engages the kid in a way that other ways don't. And so I've seen it really, you know, bring a genuine joy to what they're doing. And I think that potential is really the key to the future for our kids.
Wonderful. Beautiful notes to leave on. Thank you. So as we wrap up, I just want to thank you all for joining us tonight here at Educator Innovator. We really appreciate the time you put into this and to the work that you've shared also at the Current. And again, check it out if you're listening to this. If you'd like to keep up to date on future CLTV broadcasts and related opportunities, go to educatorinnovator.org and sign up for our monthly newsletter. It's chock full of great stuff, and I think it's one of the best newsletters out there, so don't hesitate to sign up. You can also follow us at Twitter at innovates_ed. So thanks everybody for watching, and have a good evening.